Dr. Wu, since last September, the Philippines have threatened to initiate a new round of international arbitration against China on issues related to the so-called marine environment protection. And given the previous so-called arbitration awards were illegal and invalid due to the court does not have jurisdiction to rule on sovereignty, so what do you make of the true intention of the Philippines to release a new round of arbitration against China?
Since September, the Philippines has been signaling a second arbitration case against China. There might be an element of falsehood in this. In my analysis, when they initiated arbitration in 2013, it caught everyone off guard without any high-profile announcement to the international community. They didn't quietly warn about arbitrating against China in advance. So when the Philippines made the statement, I think it was testing it to see how China and the international community would react. But it cannot be completely ruled out that it will not proceed. The Philippines needs to do something to assess the cost of such actions. China might also release signals regarding the countermeasures it would take. If the Philippines proceeds, the Philippines needs to evaluate whether the action is worth it. So this is my basic assessment of whether the arbitration is credible. Regarding the legal basis of the case, I believe the Philippines has been damaging the environment in the South China Sea. Their threat of arbitration is based on evidence they claim to have collected on Chinese fishermen destroying the environment around Houghton Reef and its nearby waters of the Nansha Islands. Some claims are based on false information, and others appear to have been pieced together from different areas. Certain American think tanks have provided the satellite images and other evidence to the Philippines, none of which are reliable. From a legal point of view, I'm confident that this definitely cannot be substantiated. Secondly, their initiation of new arbitration lacks a factual foundation. Chinese fishermen are subject to strict permit management and regulations standardizing fishing practices in the South China Sea. In contrast, other countries engage in widespread practices such as blast fishing, poison fishing, and overfishing, which are common and significantly impact the ecosystem. There is no evidence that Chinese fishermen are damaging the South China Sea environment.
China and the Philippines have reached a gentleman's agreement on Renaijiao in the end of the 2021 during the administration of the former President Duterte. The agreement was continued to be implemented by the current administration until February last year, and when President Marcos denied the existence and says it's the China propaganda. So could you tell us more about this gentleman's agreement? If it's legally binding, what's your feedback to Philippines government's denial of this agreement?
The gentleman's agreement does exist. Last April, when I went to Manila, I met with our embassy staff in the Philippines, including our ambassador. Indeed, there is a gentleman's agreement. In fact, after the standoff between China and the Philippines over Huangdian Island in May 2014, a consensus was reached during the rule of former President Benigno Aquino III. China agreed to the Philippines' request to allow humanitarian resupply for a few naval personnel stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre at Renai Reef, including necessities and freshwater resources. However, the condition was that they could not transport construction materials or reinforce the reef to establish as a permanent military base. This is what we call the gentleman's agreement. Therefore, the gentleman's agreement was in effect from the later period of President Aquino III's term and through the entire Duterte administration. In 2021, our embassy and their Western Command reached another new understanding and consensus. Later, the Philippines denied it. But then we made the recordings and evidence public. The Philippines panicked and felt the pain of being cornered. Later, they couldn't deny it anymore, and they even fired their Vice Admiral, Alberto Carlos, who was the leader of their Western Command. So the Philippines didn't keep its integrity. According to international law, in 2006, the International Law Commission specifically gave its opinion on the legal effect of state commitments, stating that commitments made between governments, whether written or oral, bind the parties to their actions and are effective. Therefore, the commitments made by the Philippines Foreign Minister and the commander of its Western Command, although not in written form but verbally, are binding on its government. This binding force is based on deliberation. So now they are acting in bad faith. The Philippines refuses to acknowledge the gentleman's agreement that was already reached and outright denies it, which is not what a civilized country should do. So suppose the Philippines wants to manage the disputes over Renai Reef with China. In that case, it should return to the original consensus, abide by the agreement, and avoid attempting to establish a permanent military base. Moreover, they should gradually restore the reef to its original state. Their earliest commitment was that if their military vessel broke down due to technical problems and couldn't leave, they would repair it and depart from the scene. So they should restore the local environment accordingly.
How do you assess the third party's role in the South China Sea, such as the U.S. and its allies like Japan?
They all play negative roles and exacerbate the situation. Because the United States and Japan are happy to see the Philippines causing trouble in the South China Sea. Just think about it. Were not the trouble caused by the Philippines, how could the United States possibly convince the Philippines to increase its military bases from 5 to 9? Were not the Philippines causing trouble in the South China Sea, how could Japan and the Philippines get to sign the military access agreement, which makes it possible for Japan's maritime self-defense force, warships, and even Coast Guard ships to enter Philippine military bases? Last year, aircraft from Japan's Air Self-Defense Force had already flown to some Air Force bases in the Philippines, so they are happy to see the Philippines causing trouble in the South China Sea and happy to see tensions escalate between China and the Philippines over hot-button issues like Renai Reef and Huangyan Island. It has created an illusion. They would say, see, the Philippines faces security threats from China. What should you do? I will provide security protection for you. You allow my maritime self-defense forces and me to use your military bases. This is their trap.
And lastly, can China and Philippines return to their normal bilateral ties under the current mechanism?
It depends on the Philippine government and the new administration in the Philippines, but I am not optimistic about this. Judging from the situation during the Marcos administration over the past 2 years, there are several reasons for my pessimism. Firstly, he's entirely pro-American. Secondly, he lacks integrity. Thirdly, he also cannot control his military. The Philippine military, particularly the senior officers, have received training in the United States. Some of them may even receive salaries from the United States. Therefore, these individuals are entirely pro-American. And Ferdinand Marcos Jr. cannot control the military because of this. We can hardly be optimistic about the Marcos administration's approach.